Okay, we're going to begin. This is a meeting of the Mooring Committee of the Harbor Management Commission commencing at 10 a.m. on May 13th, 2020. My name is Jack Hirschler, Commissioner and Mooring Committee Chair. After publication of the meeting notice until the beginning of this meeting, no questions or comments have been received from the public. If members of the public have questions or comments, please provide them along with your name and address immediately after this meeting, and they will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Public comments should be emailed to me at my email, sapora@me.com. That's Tango Zulu India Papa Oscar Romeo Alpha Hotel at mikeecho.com. Okay, let's begin. The agenda for people who are listening on the call is a Harbormaster's report, followed by a discussion of the online mooring administrative systems report, a review of draft interpretation of our current rule regarding mooring assignments for the harbor management area property owners who are asserting riparian rights, and finally a discussion about the docked vessel information report submission status and plans to improve compliance with that requirement. So let's begin with a report from the Harbormaster. Ed?
Hi, good morning. Ed Billings, Harbormaster. I'll keep this brief and reserve comments throughout the conversation. Generally speaking, the mooring permits numbering currently 117 have been delivered to all mooring permit holders that are approved, meaning they have supplied their current registration and current insurance documentation. One thing with the new system, anything that goes out of date, it pops up a little red light on my screen, and so that puts those people who need to be reminded to either A, submit their registration renewal and or insurance form that action is needed. Of the 117 previously approved, there are a number, I haven't done a head count, but I'm guessing there's probably 20 that even though they've received their harbor permits, still need to update their application. Other than that, the system seems to be operating quite nicely. It keeps all of us up to date with any information that is needed. And with the recent adjustments to the selection process, that has been quite helpful in just the administration portion of this, which was kind of a pain up until that time. Earlier this month, I was alerted by Travis of there's an owner at the Tide Mill building that needs to do some repairs on his ramp. He has indicated to me through a telephone conversation that is in the works. However, he's having difficulty, given the COVID situation, finding any suitable contractors to do that work. I indicated I would check back with him in about 30 days to find out any updates with that. Other than that, I'm not aware of any other serious issues. I know there's a lot of people concerned about their spots in the harbor this year, but I think all of that will be handled quite nicely by the crew at Pequot with their mooring apparatus, and continue the good communications that we all have.
Ed, can you comment on how many moorings were assigned in the public mooring field this spring?
From the wait list?
Yes.
I believe that was 6.
6, yeah.
If you want an exact number, I can get that for you, but I'm pretty sure it was 6.
Uh-huh. I noted also this morning there's 57 people on the waiting list currently and 2 waiting list applications that are under review by you, so 59 total once those go through.
Yes. I had a call yesterday from one lady in Westport that apparently she was trying to claim that she had registered for the wait list, but it was never recorded, and I didn't recognize the name. Had a nice conversation with her. Ultimately wound up calling her back with a couple of suggestions, but she's just going to file a regular wait list application. She's now moved to the Southport area, so she was appreciative of being able to get back on the list and so forth.
Any questions for Ed?
No, sounds good.
Okay. So moving on, there's the second item on the agenda is a report on the online mooring administrative system that we implemented in January. In April, in consultation with Ed regarding a few administrative processing issues that he encountered in our first season of doing renewals and using the system, we made a few modification requests to online mooring, and online mooring really immediately made all of the changes that we were looking for where they made sense. So included in that were a new question about whether the applicant on the waiting list for the first time is reporting that they have a Southport home with a dock, yes or no, and a new question about whether the applicant on the waiting list has a South Benson Marina slip currently, yes or no. There's also a mechanism put in place to verify the eligibility of the person to receive priority placement on the waiting list for riparian rights as evaluated by the Harbormaster, which is new and addresses the issue that the moment somebody checks yes on a waiting list application for the first time, they would go immediately to the top of the waiting list without the Harbormaster having an opportunity to even review the application. So that's now fixed, and they don't go to the top of the list unless the Harbormaster has approved them as appropriately applying as a riparian applicant.
So, question, Jack, because we have to publicize the waiting list, does that person who has checked the riparian rights box, does that show up on the waiting list, or are they simply is it just their name? Do we know?
I'm trying to remember, Ed, what that report looks like.
It does. Yes, it does.
It shows yes or no.
It does show up.
Yeah.
It does show up. Okay.
But only after Ed has approved them as asserting riparian rights. Properly.
Right. So if Ed hasn't approved them, otherwise their name is just wherever it happens to fall on the list when they signed up.
It'd be at the bottom of the list.
Yeah. Okay.
It would still indicate that they were asserting riparian rights, but they'd be at the bottom of the list, like any
right.
other app.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And Ed, I think your sense after having these modifications that we requested, and there were a couple of other minor operational things, but not significant, that you felt like the system was operating more effectively for you?
Definitely.
Good.
Good.
I'm sure in the long run it's going to make everything operate a lot easier.
Yeah.
I think you're right, Harry.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe so as well.
The next point I wanted to address on our agenda is the action plan that we want to put in place to start taking real advantage of the online moorings maintenance record management for mooring tackle. We've talked about this. We've got things like everything else a little bit waylaid by the virus and dealing with the issues related to that. But it feels like the Commission and the Harbormaster should be making it a priority to begin to put in place that piece of this integrated system, so that our obligation to know that the moorings are being maintained by the vendor, which is Pequot Yacht Club, are documented, and with respect to each mooring that we're giving permits to, we'll have a record of the maintenance of each of those. So it's from Jeff Engborg's review of the system as it was delivered to us in January. He may, with Ed's consultation, want to recommend that we ask Online Mooring to consider some modifications to simplify the system for having a single vendor maintaining all the moorings in one harbor, which is not the norm for Online Mooring. And if that's the case, I just feel like we need to figure out what's necessary that we need to do with respect to system changes, so it's easier for Ed and for Jeff Engborg's team to use that system. But I think to not be using it is a mistake. I don't know if others have a different view, but we got the system and built that piece of it specifically so that our obligation to manage and oversee mooring maintenance would be integrated into it. So
can it keep track of each individual? Can it keep track of each individual mooring when it's maintained and then it goes on a cycle?
Right. It's on there's 3 sort of zones in the harbor that's been in place for some years as maintenance, and the system is set up for every single moorings tackle to be documented that it's been inspected, and for them to put in notes and attach documents if wanted relative to each moorings tackle, so that there's a record of the careful management of the mooring tackle with respect to every mooring in the harbor. So
that's great.
That's the piece we're talking about. The issue that Jeff Engborg has legitimately shared with me is that he'd rather have the ability to do a block of moorings tackle updating rather than having to do them one by one for each piece of mooring tackle, because he's doing all of it. In many harbors, there's lots of different vendors, and so it makes sense to give each vendor opportunities to input information about each particular piece. But here, he's doing them in blocks.
Okay, sure.
That was one thing that Jeff and I had discussed, was the hoping that there was the ability within Online Mooring to do the moorings as a batch, as a lot of them are all the same. And we're still looking into that with Brad, so that it just cuts down on the administrative time to go into each individual mooring. That's like, okay, this has that, it was changed in 2021, so on and so forth. So I mean, if you could do a block of them, 10 or 20 at a time, it would be very helpful. On the administrative side, a
lot
less time consuming.
Absolutely.
Right. Because we're talking about every piece of tackle, not just moorings. So moorings often have 2 pieces of tackle. The mooring floats have multiple tackle elements, anchoring.
Yeah, you've got
mooring floats. So that's a lot more than just the count for our moorings.
Right.
So what does Brad think that it's possible to do this work as a batch?
Ed, you must have information I haven't talked to.
I think that's something that we have to visit again.
Okay.
Sometimes it's difficult to speak with him personally.
Yeah.
As you're aware, I've had a number of
meeting with Jeff and maybe me and Ed to just and Brad and sit down and just bang through this, because it's probably, if we were all sitting in one place, it's probably a 1-hour conversation, and then he could program it, but we haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay.
And we couldn't really meet face-to-face because this came up right as the virus concerns were really arising. So
well, I think, Jack...
Kim,
Jack, I think you're right. I mean, we wanted to have this set up to make Jeff's life easier and to keep a record to meet our own obligations. It seems a shame not to move forward and set it up so that Jeff can use it easily.
Right.
Oh, sure. That would be a priority, basically.
Yeah, I
right.
think. Right. I mean, we're, again, replacing a paper-based or spreadsheet-based system that the club has been using, similar to the sort of combination of paper and spreadsheet that preceded the management by the Harbormaster of mooring records. So it's an opportunity to put them all in one system that's really sort of designed to integrate them. And I think that it's important for us to do that. So maybe we should try to set up a conference call if we can't meet face-to-face with social distancing with the right players, and see if we can just sketch out what can be done and what's really being requested by the players here, and get moving on it.
I'll reach out to Brad and see what his schedule is like, or if it's something just since he's been thinking about it, it's something simple that we can activate, then so much the better. But
right. Yeah, the only tricky part, if you talk to him, we don't want to lose the opportunity to put notations in the system regarding any particular piece of tackle for any particular mooring, because that's important too. And having looked at what Jeff has been doing in the past, his team make notes about things that they need to remember to look at next time, and we don't want to lose the opportunity for them to use the system to record those notes relative to any particular piece. So on the one hand, we want to make it easy to enter blocks of them. On the other hand, we want to still retain the opportunity to keep those notes for you to know about and for the people maintaining the moorings to know about relative to anything that needs checking or any other.
Good point.
So it's a balancing act about simplifying the entry process without losing the detailed record keeping.
It almost seems as though it would be a two-stage. One is going to be for the individual, and then adding a component that will allow an area to be updated in terms of the tackle.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? It sounds like the action plan is Ed's going to reach out to Brad and have a discussion about how to move this forward with Jeff Eggenborg's team. And I'm happy to be involved if you want me to be or not, either way. Okay?
No, that sounds good.
Cool. All right. Any other comments, questions on anything related to online mooring?
No.
All right. I'd like to turn over the next piece to Jeff to sort of lead us through this discussion. This is a continuation of an earlier conversation we had in the Mooring Committee back in March or February about the interpretation of our current rules relative to property owners' assertions of riparian rights under our current rules and procedures. Jeff?
Well, I think that this guidance that I've been working on, or we, has become a little too complex, maybe. But I think we've resolved the issues, the principal issues, and we talked about it earlier. It's up to the Harbormaster to make a decision on an applicant's not an applicant's riparian rights, because we know that the waterfront property owner has riparian rights, but whether that will mean that an applicant can go to the head of the waiting list. So what you've talked about earlier this morning with the change to the online system and the Harbormaster reviewing an application and then making a determination whether in a particular instance the riparian right assertion will enable the waiting list applicant to go to the head of the list. So I think in that regard we've worked that out, and and also with respect to the policy in the plan that talks about one dock and or mooring. And I think what we've agreed upon, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, is that doesn't mean that every property owner has a right to a dock and a mooring. It will be subject to review based on the circumstances at the time, the circumstances of that particular situation. And then we also did an analysis in that series of maps of all of the properties with, I guess maybe we've made a mistake in some place, but it's got to be pretty close looking at the photos, all of the properties that have a dock for access to the harbor. And that one clarification is, and this is consistent with the traditional practice and historic practice, is that the Commission doesn't support mooring locations upstream of the Pequot Yacht Club's designated Anchorage area. And that's because of the shallow water depths and also the understanding that the property owners all have exercised riparian rights with dock structures. So I think we pretty much, unless I'm missing something, dealt with that issue of the one dock and or mooring, and that a property owner can't automatically assert riparian rights or littoral rights and go to the head of the list. Then there are some other parts of this that we also have to give some more attention to, and one aspect of this, and I think, Jack, you mentioned this, if the Harbormaster can make a decision on the riparian rights issue by saying, okay, you have a dock, I'm not going to grant you have reasonable access, there's no space for you to get a boat offshore, mooring offshore your property, so I'm not going to issue a mooring permit as well. And he'd be doing that in the interest of protecting, in part, public rights, because there may be limited spaces for moorings. So then the question arose, could the Harbormaster in that instance refuse to renew a previously granted mooring permit? Because you're making the argument, well, you already have a dock and we want to have more public space. And I thought that's something that's not just a clarification of the rules. That's something that we really have to think about making a specific change or amendment to the rules to do that, because the Commission's never done that before. Not renewed. I forget how many property owners there are who have both docks and moorings. But if we were to say, okay, well, we're not going to renew your mooring permit this year because we want to have more public space, I think that's a significant thing that we want to think about. And also, we've never had the policy that, say, someone who has a mooring permit and historically has had a permit, that person moves, no longer owns the property. I think if we want to have the policy that mooring permit is no longer valid for that person, I think we also have to be specific with a change in the mooring rules and procedures.
Yeah, one of my takeaways from your second draft, which was circulated early this morning, is that I think it's time for us to distinguish between things that we can clarify in a document like this versus starting to formulate a list of things that we want to implement or consider implementing with an update to our rules and an amendment to our current rules and procedures. Because it feels like there's a number of things that are starting to fill in here that warrant a real close look at everything in our rules and procedures, and the proper way would be to go to that process.
Yeah.
I mean, another one that came up was our notice that we have the strike one, strike two for people on the waiting list, except people who are riparian rights and have been granted that appear under our rules, the combination of our rules, to have a perpetual right to take a pass on an offered suitable mooring, and it's like a lifetime first right of refusal. I don't think that was the intention of the framers of the rules and procedures, but by accident, that's really what it amounts to. And I think that's another area where we should clean things up. And there are others like that. Does that make sense to folks? I mean, the strike one, strike two puts you at the bottom of the list if you're a person, but are people with riparian rights that have been authorized as legitimate by the Harbormaster stay at the top of the list, so they can't get put back on the bottom of the list under our current rules. Mm-hmm. So they can be offered a mooring that's suitable for them year after year after year and keep taking a pass.
Yes,
right. I certainly agree that it shouldn't exist. The rule shouldn't allow that to happen. There might be other ways.
Not for a lifetime.
Yeah, not for a lifetime.
Right. I think it's just an example of what Jeff is saying, that there's some things here that we'd like to do that don't fit into an interpretation. That we just need to do some amending of the good work that's been done before us.
Right. And I can think of an example of a situation since I've been on the commission where a homeowner with a dock came before the commission with a request to expand the dock in order to accommodate a boat, and that homeowner already had a mooring. So now we have the situation where the homeowner has a larger dock that can accommodate his boat and a mooring to put the boat on when he doesn't want to put it on the dock. So I think that we need to think carefully about, what that relationship is between the homeowners and the docks and or a mooring.
It's great to have the dock.
Wonderful.
Or it's great to have the mooring. You really don't need both.
Well, and especially to petition the commission to expand the dock when you have a fully functioning mooring. I mean, that seems to me to be a little bit rich when you've got 57 people standing in line waiting for a mooring.
Yes.
So that the approval 100%. Of the expansion should be subject to giving up the mooring for somebody else.
Right.
And that brings up the difficult question that was raised. Yes, it's nice to have a dock and a mooring, and now a property owner has both. Can you envision a situation where you might not renew that mooring because you're saying, okay, well, you have a dock and we've got a big waiting list, so we're not going to renew that mooring, that permit this year. That's a significant change, policy change.
Totally agree.
I guess my takeaway from all of this, Jeff, is that it's time for this committee to begin to formulate the kinds of changes we'd like the entire commission to consider for an amendment and go through the right process for amending the rules and procedures. And to be mindful of the implications for that on the work around updating the whole harbor management plan at the same, either at the same time or in advance of the update to the harbor management plan.
That's one policy, the significant consideration to give. The other is that same person sells his or her home and relocates, moves to North Fairfield someplace. Do we have the policy then that mooring permit is no longer valid and is available to somebody else? I think that also requires a change in the rule. I think that's a more I can see that happening. I can see that's an easier change than the first one we looked at, where you don't renew somebody's permit because you're saying we got too many people waiting for a mooring.
Right.
Just to confirm, Jeff, you're saying that if they got their mooring by virtue of asserting riparian rights and jumped in front of 50 or 60 other people and then moved away, because if they waited their turn like everybody else, no matter where they live, they should be able to keep their mooring.
But some of the property owners have had the moorings for many years.
But they got But if they got them by jumping in front of the then existing list of waiting list people, that I feel differently about that than if they waited their turn, like Mr. Aluzzi did.
Yeah, we'd have to go back and look at each case because there's not, there's only so many property owners that have mooring permits now, and we could go back and look at each instance of how they obtain those permits.
I guess I don't know how many. If we were to make a change here, this is the kind of thing that's significant enough that it needs to be in an update of our rules and procedures.
Right, it's not an interpretation of what we've done so far.
Right. The other thing I was going to ask you about is on number 5 on page 4 of the document that you sent us early this morning. You talk about our thinking about folks who have waterfront property north of the commercial North Anchorage, and that we don't intend to put moorings there. I thought we had talked about the fact that we also had the view that people with property abutting that part of the harbor aren't really eligible to be treated as riparian because there are no moorings immediately offshore their property. And so those folks would want to go on the waiting list not asserting riparian rights because there's no moorings available to anybody immediately offshore their property. But number 5 doesn't say that.
Yeah, we could add that simply. If those property owners wish to obtain a mooring in the harbor, they would go on they could go through the regular waiting list. Yeah, I think that's
right. They go through the waiting list not asserting riparian rights and wait their turn.
Right.
It's the same waiting list. It's just that they don't.
The same waiting list,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's only one wait list.
Right.
I mean, they would still have
that could be by interpretation because we've already said in number 5 that we don't have them. There's no history of having them in that part of the harbor, and so really the question is, can somebody way up by the tide mill be asserting riparian rights and get a mooring assignment properly and go to the top of the list and get a mooring way down the harbor? That is not immediately offshore their property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not that they don't have riparian rights. It's just that in this instance, we'd make a judgment that they've obtained access through their docks. If they want a mooring, they can add themselves to the list. Yeah, that should be added to number 5.
Right. I mean, that's what I think close out questions about number 5.
So we're defining offshore as being truly offshore within a limited area.
It says immediately in our rules today. And it's hard to say immediately means way down the harbor, which is the closest they could be is at the northern tip of the public anchorage before you get into the commercial North Anchorage. That's as close as they could possibly be. That's pretty far.
Right.
Yeah, and since there's so many of those people, if there's 16 waterfront properties that have docks, and we had the policy that they're all, because of riparian rights, eligible for a mooring somewhere in the harbor, that would displace a number of people in the anchorage.
Right.
Sure would. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, definitely.
Right.
So I think that's
basically
that's a
numbers 1 through 11, 1 through 10 is what we're saying. 1 through 9 are the folks who have riparian rights that would entitle them to theoretically go to the head of the list for a mooring.
You're looking at the photo with the numbers of the docks, Kim? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I think that's right.
One through 9, yeah.
Right, 9 is right off Hugh Smith's house, or is that right off Perry Green is 9?
Yeah, and then there's, what did I do for 10 and 11?
They're down behind. They're right at the in the North Anchorage area.
Yeah.
Ten is Rossau, correct?
Yes. So I for writing that clarification, I was considering 12 and above being. Yeah. So how do we treat 10 and 11?
Yeah.
They're right. Those I believe number 10 has a well, that was a tricky one when that came about, if you remember. And I believe that property
11?
owner had. I don't know who 11 is. I don't.
No, 11.
Oh, 11.
It's next to the Smiths.
Yeah.
Is that the one?
No, we're up at the other end of the harbor, Harry.
Oh.
Dock number 11 in the photo. It used to be the old Tomasi place. I'm not sure who owns it now.
Do 10 and 11 have moorings? Are they yacht club members and have moorings in the yacht club Anchorage?
10 does. 10 is Dave Rossow.
Yes.
11, again, I'm not sure who owns that property.
All right, so we have to give some thought about those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, what to do about number 10 and 11?
Now, just for clarification, and perhaps I didn't quite understand what you said, Kim. You're saying that numbers 1 through either 9 and maybe 10 or 11 would automatically be granted riparian rights, or they would?
No, I'm saying they could
from?
claim they could claim to be immediately that the water would be immediately moorings immediately offshore of their property would be the ones where we would consider giving them moorings.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're saying that the moorings north of the North Anchorage, because of the shallow water, et cetera, those folks have riparian rights, but their expectation of being granted a mooring offshore is not realistic.
Right.
It's not something that we've done before or about to do. While the folks from 1 through 9 are immediately, the water's immediately offshore their property, theoretically entitle them to a mooring within that area.
And we have moorings there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say most of them do have moorings. I mean, but going back to your other statement, if your dock provides sufficient access to the harbor for your vessel, then I guess I'm unclear as to why we should be considering granting them an additional mooring. Or going back to the discussion, can we say because you have a dock that is perfectly sufficient for your vessel, there really is no reason for you to have an additional mooring? Which goes back to Harry, I believe, concurred with that.
Yeah, and I mean the number 10 dock. The area is a little bit narrow in there, but there's another way of getting around through the boats.
Yeah, I have intimate knowledge of that property going back to when Smith Richardson used to own it, and was at Pequot. When he had his boat, he had maybe a 34-foot sailboat. It was immediately off his dock structure. But he would either come to the yacht club and get a ride out, or just row out to his boat. Then the property was sold, and they built a much nicer structure in there. Still tight maneuvering, I would say.
Yeah, it is.
And 11, I'm not sure if I would imagine that they are a boat owner. Whether they're a member of Pequot or not, I do not know.
Well, it's interesting to see how many docks there are.
Yeah, it is. I was surprised.
Picture, right? Docks on almost every one of those.
Well, we can look at each one of those, one through. Look at them all and see which ones have moorings as well as a dock. And then the question is, do you want to make such a significant change that you would not renew the mooring permits for those who do have mooring permits now.
It sounds like you're saying, though, that we need to change our rules and procedures before we would just do that. Is that what you? I was thinking I was hearing you say that if we can't do it by an interpretation, we should just go through the process of changing our rules to do that.
That would be certainly my, for whatever it's worth, opinion, because I can imagine the property owners saying, "Wait a minute, I've got a mooring permit. I've had it for some instances 25 years, and you're saying now that I can't. You're changing the rules in the middle of the whole thing." I don't disagree that it's not a reasonable argument to make, but I think it needs to go through the proper hearing process.
Right. So it won't be a surprise to go through the hearing process and so forth. I mean, Kim, as I've thought more about this, I just am feeling more and more like that's the right way to go at this, because we're sort of limited here in the changes we want to make, and there are a number of them that we should clean up here, I think.
Well, look, I totally agree. I don't see how we can ask people to do something that's against our own rules. I mean, or tell people to do something when we have a rule that says that they're in the right. You know, so I think that that we not only do we have to change the rules, but I think we have to think carefully about whether or not the rules changes apply retroactively. And you know, to say that other commissions and other harbor masters' decisions are incorrect, I think is pretty arrogant, and that we may not like the result, and we may decide to move for policy reasons in a different direction. But I think we have to tread very carefully on before we decide to tell people that they can't have what the rules say they can have.
I mean, there's a history
so I think
of
changing the rules is
in our rules before in this harbor. So should we decide that after this date, this is the rule, it may be that's what we decide to do.
Something like that. So that everybody, I mean, everybody needs to know what we're. Everybody needs to know how it works, and we can't. So
I'm sort of coming around to the view that we can try to interpret here, but there's sort of limits, like what we talked about in number 5 about the shallow water and the people up in north. But beyond that, these issues about people moving away and people, these other issues, I think we need to probably readdress our existing rules and procedures to put in place what we mean them to be.
Right. I agree. Otherwise, we have no credibility.
Right. And until we update our harbor management plan, there may still be a few little disconnects, like the suggestion in the harbor management plan that you can have both. You know, it certainly leaves that open the way it's written in the harbor management plan.
Well, and the harbor master does have the authority to make the decisions, and certainly it seems to me that the work that Jeff has done and the sort of the basic principles support a lot of the things that we think are the right way to go. But I think in terms of the more we talk about it, the more we think about, you know, pulling something away from people who rightfully got it according to the rules. I think that's as much as I think it would be great to be able to do it on our own. You know, that's not what a commission. That's not who we are or who we can be. I mean, this is, you know, we answer to the public, and we have to let the public know when there's a major shift in how we're going to do business, and we have to get their okay for that. So, as cumbersome as that may be, I don't think we have a choice.
What we talked about was the idea of giving some kind of guidance to the harbor master for potential requests in the future for people who want to put moorings in more open to the ocean water that is outside the inner harbor, and we don't address that. It's in the harbor management area potentially, but not in the inner harbor. And you know, if you go for a walk down Beachside Avenue in Westport, you can see there's a homeowner who got permission apparently to put in a lift dock and a mooring about 100 yards off of his property in open water on Long Island Sound. And, you know, I could imagine possibly that Ed would get a question like that at some point, and we have nothing. We're silent on that whole issue.
Right.
And yet it's in our jurisdiction.
Right.
So it's another thing that we should consider including if we get a chance to, or take the opportunity to update our rules and procedures.
Agreed.
All right, so for next steps, I guess I'd like to propose that we start in this committee and as an upcoming meeting to think about look at our rules and procedures and start to put down on paper which changes we'd like to begin to think about making, and over time we can work out the particular language we'd like to bring to the broader Harbor Management Commission. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think we can also, as part of that exercise, distinguish between the rules that we need interpretation of versus those that we need to change.
Right.
And what I'm thinking specifically is, and I'm maybe jumping the agenda here, Jack, so I apologize, but the July 15th deadline for getting boats in the harbor this year. I mean, I think that that's something the Commission can support Ed and say, yeah, we agree that this year, we're not going to enforce that rule. So there are the two kinds of rule, quote unquote, changes. I think that we could make a list of.
Right. And I think that conversation we had about Section 5, Paragraph 5, in Jeff's document here about people north of the North Anchorage don't qualify to apply as riparian.
Right.
That's their waivers application. So that's an interpretation, I think, as well.
Right.
Okay. All right. So I'm sort of documenting that we'll move forward with certainly creating the list of rule changes and separating that from interpretations that might more immediately come before the full Harbor Management Commission, like one you just talked about.
Might I make a comment, Jack, on something here? The rules allow now for the requirements to be suspended by the Harbormaster in the interest of public safety and not creating an unreasonable hardship. So the Harbormaster can suspend any of these requirements if there's a valid public reason to do so. So I don't think we need to. I think that's already provided. And then I also added to I think if we make some of these changes, we should anticipate that they'll be challenged by a waterfront property owner who thinks that his or her rights are somehow being taken away. And so the process for the rules now allow for someone who's aggrieved by or upset by a decision by the Harbormaster to ask the Harbor Management Commission to take a look at it and I guess essentially make a recommendation, but the Commission can't overturn a decision by the Harbormaster. Mm-hmm. And then I guess the next step, if the satisfactory resolution wasn't achieved, then the person upset could go to the DEEP and I guess file some sort of a complaint because DEP is overseeing the Harbormasters, and then the final, not the final, but the next step would be to bring some sort of an action in the Superior Court to challenge what was done.
Right.
I think we could expect someone to challenge. We maybe, but just something to keep in mind.
I think you're totally right, Jeff. If somebody's, yeah. But that's a good reminder. Thank you that the Harbormaster has the authority to suspend rules. And I guess I was simply suggesting the July 15 date that the Commission vote on it simply to as a statement of support for Ed's decision to suspend that rule.
This is a very unusual year.
Inquire about it. It is, and I have had a number of people inquire about it. For various reasons.
Right.
One, an individual has not been working the past 2 or 3 months and is concerned that they might not be able to get their vessel out of the yard or pay the yard bill. Is concerned about that. Another elderly gentleman was very concerned about the protocols for getting to and from one's boat, and also concerned about contracting the virus from someone else, because he needs assistance getting to and from his boat. So, and another one was very similar to that. So I did tell him that would be coming up on our
club's rules about making appointments to access your vessel may be considered too onerous by some boaters. It's not their normal procedure, but they put that in place for safety reasons, understandably.
Right.
And it may be that boaters don't want to subject themselves to being under those rules for accessing their boat.
Right.
So there's lots of good reasons to be waiving it for this year only. I don't anticipate this would be controversial when we get the whole team together.
No. I think you're right.
No.
All right.
I'm pretty sure.
Up this conversation about the interpretations versus getting moving on updating our rules and procedures. Any other comments, questions? All right. The last item on our agenda, besides any new business, is a discussion around the docked vessel information reports. As of this morning, there are 2 vessels at slips at Pequot Yacht Club and 1 vessel at a private property owner's dock that have submitted docked vessel information reports into the online mooring system. And our requirements are that the Harbormaster know that information about all the vessels in slips or at private docks. And I guess we need to talk about what we might do. I can also say that I think other members of the club received a request for submission of information that would be required to fill out one of these docked vessel information reports for everybody at a Pequot slip and, in fact, everybody at the North Anchorage mooring from the club. So the club, it sounds like, should be receiving all the necessary information to complete a docked vessel information report for the people in the slips, and we do still need them for vessels that are kept at private docks. So with that information, I guess I would turn it back to Ed to comment on what we're going to do about pursuing these docked vessel reports.
I'm glad you asked the question. I don't have a solid answer for that, other than what we have already tried to do and reach out to, the membership of Pequot, and perhaps if I could use Jeff's information that he has on these charts. If you know the owners of those properties, we just send a letter through the mail requesting that information and giving them access to the online mooring system. I think my natural suspicion would be, it's like, here's the town of Fairfield looking for another fee from me, so they might be reluctant to furnish that information. However, given the given the need to disseminate information, that gives us the right to have you in our database.
Jeff, if memory serves, I thought you said in a previous meeting that you thought you had the names and addresses of people who previously were communicated to who owned property on Harbor Road.
Did I not send that to you, Ed? When we sent did we have the letter that went out? I remember sending the letter to you that we sent to the dock people, but I didn't send you the address list, or if I didn't, I'll look for it. I'll look for it now.
I'll check while we're.
Remember we talked about the letter that was sent to the property owners, asking for information on dock vessels. I remember sending that, but maybe I didn't send the list that we had of the owners at the time. If not, I'll go see what I have, and then I'll ask Betty. But I think there's a way of on the town website looking at the tax maps to be able to see the parcels that are the names of the owners of the parcels along the harbor, and we could relate that.
Right.
We could use that to check on.
Yeah, because that was a while ago that we had that communication, if I recall.
Yeah. I'll look at. Don't look take your time now. The other thing is, and it's not a big deal, of course, but if you're making changes on online mooring, on the home page, if that's what it's called for the online mooring for Southport, where it says docked vessel permit, might that just be changed to docked vessel information, so it doesn't look like
that's a good idea.
Like you're saying that we're asking for a permit, or they need a permit from us to get for their dock.
Right.
Yeah. On all of the ones that have docks, do those boats have decals?
No.
No. Okay.
They don't get permits. They don't have to pay anything, which was Jeff or Ed's point just a moment ago. But Ed is required to keep all that. Is it insured?
The information, sure.
All that. Is it registered? He needs to have all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. The only way that they would have a permit. I'm sorry, Kim. Is that if there's a couple of instances that we've been talking about where individuals not only have a dock, but they also have a mooring, in which case, yes, they would get a permit.
Yeah.
But there are only 27, am I correct? If I'm looking at Jeff's pictures again, there are 27 possible non-Pequot docked vessel reports that we need.
At maximum, right.
Right, max.
Right.
Yep.
Well, I'm pretty sure you can get that from Vision Appraisal if you have the address.
We just have to get them in once.
I think you might be right, Kim. Through Vision Appraisal.
Yeah. And I think you just need the address for that. I don't think you need a name. Once you have the address, that'll gives you the name. So.
And we can get that from the town maps.
Right.
Now that just involves some legwork to go down there, correct, and go through town records.
I think you can get it on.
You can request the information?
Oh, I think you can do it all online.
Yeah.
Town of Fairfield Vision Appraisal or Vision Appraisal Town of Fairfield, I'm not sure which is the bigger category, and then you key in the address and it gives you the name of the owner.
Yep.
So I don't know how we get the address. But if that's part of Jeff's original communication, then we have the address, and you could use Vision Appraisal to check the owner's name and.
Yeah, it's either Sasko Hill Road or Harbor Road.
Right.
Well, here's labels I did in 2014. But they only had 3, 6, 9, 12. I only had 13 labels. So that means probably whoever sent them out had the other ones. But anyway, we can figure this out. And right, these are Harbor Road and Sasko Hill Road addresses.
Right.
It's only the two streets.
Right.
Yeah, actually, I only have 2 Sasko Hill Road addresses on this. All right.
Again, once we get this in once, it'll be much easier.
Yeah.
And every year thereafter, it's easy to just request an update from them. Okay. Any new business?
I bet I know. I bet because some of these people probably already had. Well, anyway, sorry. I'll deal with this and get this over to you, Ed.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Is there any other business for today?
Yes.
Yes.
The question about the yacht club's floats. Did you get the email that I provided that I sent over with the DEP asking for?
Yes.
As I understand it, and we don't have Jeff to be able to describe this, so I hope I'm doing it correctly. But the yacht club was pursuing the permissions needed from DEP to maintain the ideal 18 floats and the other float they call the whaler float.
3 of the 4 ideal floats, yes.
Yeah, so there's 4 ideal 18 floats now, and the 1 whaler float. And the drawings that we had from the time of the harbor management plan and the engineered drawings of existing conditions and proposed conditions, which were 1994 thereabouts, they showed the whaler float, and they showed 3 ideal 18 floats.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that the DEP accepted those as documentation that they were in place prior to 1995 or by 1995 or whatever it is to make them eligible for certificate of permission approvals.
Mm-hmm.
However, they couldn't find documentation that that there were 4 ideal 18 floats in place. So as I understand it, and I talked with Ms. Bailey at DEEP several weeks ago, and then I got that email, and I'll explain how I got that. DEEP was okay with 3 ideal 18 floats and the whaler float, and they'd also be okay with a 4th ideal 18 float if they reduced the square footage of the whaler float and then attributed that reduction to the ideal 18 float, so that there would the total square footage of floats would be the same. In other words, they'd have four ideal 18 floats and the 1 whaler float, and they would be equal to the square footage now of 3 ideal 18s and 1 whaler float. You follow that?
Yes.
So they asked, Mr. Rakowski from Race called and said DEEP was interested to move forward with this, with the approval. They wanted a letter from the town, of course, meaning the Harbor Commission, that this was okay with the Harbor Commission. And I said that, we need something. I just don't want to bring that up myself. I'd like to have something in writing where DEEP is asking for that. And so Mr. Rakowski provided that email that I sent to you. And then I said the mooring committee could discuss this, and then the commission would have to discuss whether to, send a letter of support. But essentially, as I understand it, with a letter of support from the commission, DEEP is okay with issuing the. And they can. There's no question they'd have to take them out now. They could keep them in until the authorization is completed. So I think that's something that the committee would want to discuss and make a recommendation next week.
Kim, you and I had talked a bit about this. Do you have a thought on next steps on this?
Well, I think it would be. I think we need to. The mooring committee needs to discuss it. My initial reaction is, I'm fine with that. I'm sure Pequot's a little bit disappointed to have to reduce the square footage, but if this means that they can, go ahead and keep that 4th ideal dock there, I'm sure they feel pretty good about that. So I certainly would support that, but I think we need to hear from if anybody else on the mooring committee has any thoughts about that. And then, Jeff, it would be great if you could, the meeting on Wednesday, kind of present an outline of what we talked about, so that when we present this to the whole commission, we've got a little bit of focus and don't have to, start digging into 1995 and, how this came about and that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
No, to me, the meeting is, you say Wednesday, Kim, or is it the regular Tuesday
Tuesday,
meeting?
Next Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah.
This coming Tuesday.
This coming Tuesday.
Yep. Okay.
But it's going to be by
phone. Are we going to do it? Are we going to do it
exactly the
same way as we're doing today?
Correct. That's how that's how the town has public meetings. I as an aside, I think this has gone well, but I think it's hard to focus on some of these complex issues if you don't have you're kind of not there and having a face-to-face discussion. And my concern is that this is an important issue that we need to get the rest of the commission up to speed on. And since some of the folks are new and don't have the history, I think it would be really helpful if when we bring this up for discussion next week, if Jeff, you could have an outline, just like what you've presented here, to for the commission as a whole to approve.
Well, I think that's what we have to do. Not to speak for the yacht club, but I think you'd make the argument that the harbor management plan envisioned these structures because they were part of the proposed conditions when we put the harbor management plan together. And the plan also talks about maintaining the facilities, including moorings of the yacht club, necessary for the yacht club's viability. So with the understanding that they're not in the federal navigation project and that what would be approved would be equal in square footage to what existed, prior to 1995, and then therefore it meets the DEP's requirements for approval under a COP, then, that's part of the background that the commission would consider when, considering a letter to DEP saying that these are consistent with the harbor management plan. Right. And then you also have the issue of the ownership of the tackle too. That hasn't come up, but the town owns that tackle, right? As I understand it. So we're essentially allowing the yacht club to have the commission would be allowing the yacht club to continue to operate those floats as a commercial entity using the town-owned mooring tackle. We haven't considered any implications of that.
But they're paying mooring tackle fees, and
they're paying the mooring tackle fees. Yeah.
Essentially,
maintenance.
So the yacht club is paying the mooring tackle fees,
just like
All right.
Just like
yes. They're paying both the permit fee and the maintenance charge.
Right.
What is
so the only thing I would
I
add
can
to that
write this
is maybe to lay out the alternatives. So the alternatives are to either remove those from the club's ability to use, to have them, and that would have a chilling effect on their ability to do education and to attract sailors.
The sailing.
And that would be potentially problematic to the existence of the club long term. And the alternative of relocating these floats into the North Anchorage would have the effect of both reducing the number of moorings for regular vessels in the North Anchorage and also have vessels that have no auxiliary power going the entire length of the harbor to put themselves back on those floats. And that's, I think, a danger to the other property that's in the harbor to have boats being sailed that far up into the harbor unnecessarily. Where they are now is Midway up the harbor, and still sometimes the ideals can get into trouble.
And with those narrow passages, there's much more chance for damage.
Right. I mean, I think we should address the fact that the alternatives are not pretty, and where things are in status quo makes the most sense for the continuity and survival of the yacht club, and also to prevent damage to other vessels.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What is the difference in square footage? Is it a lot?
That's what I wish I could hear from. I don't have any drawings, and I don't know. So whatever the square footage of the ideal 18, I don't know, Kim. I can ask that though. I'll ask that.
Is the pier that or the dock that we're looking at the one that's like 3 sections long? That is just off of that large boat at the end of the dock?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
No, Harry. We were looking. It's right off the north part of Perry Green.
Yeah, you're both saying.
Where the Schley's boat, the powerboat, the Schley's powerboat is. It's right off of that boat.
Okay.
Right at Perry Green, and the last slip before you get to Perry Green, it's right off of that.
Yeah, you can practically jump onto it. It's
it's not actually attached to the wall, right?
No.
There's space.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
It may be
Okay.
anchored to the wall, but
Right.
Yeah.
I think that dock is either 6 or maybe 8 feet wide. I'm not sure the exact dimensions of the ideal floats, but I'm guessing you'd have to cut off maybe 4 feet of the whaler float, give or take, maybe a little bit more.
Jeff Engborg mentioned this to me, and he didn't seem terribly troubled by that as a solution to get the fourth.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for him, but my impression of that conversation in passing was that it wasn't a serious takeaway.
Okay.
And that could probably be done over this coming winter, not now.
Well, they depending on how quickly they process the application, it could be done now, because the certificates of permission application can be acted on. They have a time within which they have to act, but they could also do it much sooner. So it wasn't clear. Depending on how long it takes to process the application, it could be in time to do it this year, is my understanding.
Oh, okay.
So our letter to DEEP would have to say that we think that that's a reasonable solution, i.e. the whaler dock gets shrunk and the ideals get to stay in place, that it's consistent with the harbor management plan, and that's it. Is there anything else we should be saying?
I don't think I can check, but now I'm thinking that maybe we should ask the yacht club to provide this request in a written form to us.
Okay.
Sort of like like any applicant would for a dock or
okay.
And that way we would be formally responding to. I think that might be
and we'll have all the dimensions.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
So the goal here would be to be in a position after next week's meeting, subject to discussion and approval, to immediately send that letter to them on.
Yes.
Yes. So that there's no question in DEEP's mind that we're okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I'm just ready.
Is that concrete enough, you think? Does that give us the discussion points that are address the issues that DEEP needs to have addressed and get us moving forward?
And it would be the sense of the mooring committee to bring this matter as just discussed to the full commission next week.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
I agree.
With our approval, with our agreement.
Harry, you're good with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I truly don't think it will materially affect the effect of it. Meaning that, let's say, in a sense, you chop off 4 feet of that. I don't think that's going to materially affect the function of that dock.
I hope not.
Probably won't. Depends on how many people that Jeff and the yacht club have signed up on that float.
Right. And we should remind ourselves when we're done with this that everything is now legit, so that when we're doing applications for dredging and so forth, we can say that everything is actually in compliance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Remind ourselves why we got here in the first place.
And that's important.
That's very important. Yeah.
Right.
Did you see the drawing that I sent it again this morning, but also a while ago, of the Corps of Engineers survey of the harbor that shows the line where the channel ends and the Anchorage begins?
Yes.
So it's north of that line where we can place moorings.
Right.
And not be concerned that they're in the navigation channel. And that's sort of eyeballing it off of that south dock at the Yacht Yard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the corner of the pool area at the golf club it's almost a straight line from the edge of that dock to the edge of that pool area. at the golf club.
Right.
I think we should be able to eyeball it.
Right.
All right. Anything else today?
I have one bit of new business, and I'm wondering. I know that we have spoken, or Jim Harmon spoke to the Conservation Commission about getting Ed their access to their vehicle so that he could get on the water. Ed, I know you're not thrilled about use of that vessel, but it seems to me at least it could be a start. But I think we need to give you some indicia, if you will, of authority. And I'm thinking if we could have a sign that was printed that you could hang over the side that says Harbormaster. Maybe a hat that says Harbormaster, a windbreaker that says Harbormaster, something so that when you are on the water, people know who you are, and you don't have to explain kind of why you're out there.
Yep.
Any thoughts?
No, it sounds good to me. I am not crazy about that boat.
I know you're not. Yeah.
Just simply for the reason if I have to go up alongside of a vessel and attach something, which that's another conversation. I don't want to belabor this meeting, but if someone is in violation, what has been done in the past? I can ask that offline, so to speak. But I know how it was handled in Bridgeport. But no, I think that's a good idea. Polo shirts, I take an extra large.
Well, we don't have Harbor Management Commission or Harbor Master colors, so you get to pick.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I think something that indicates that you have the authority to be out there checking on, whatever it is that needs to be checked on.
Right.
It's important.
The thing that I would say is that probably people, if they see somebody just pull up to a boat, there needs to be some type of name on the boat that's coming up to a boat in the harbor to say it's the Harbormaster.
Right. This is legitimate.
And that's not unreasonable. Yeah.
Right.
This is legitimate.
There's different.
It's not like I'm going to board your boat to steal something.
Exactly.
Right. Oh no one. That goes without saying, really. You have to have proper identification. Depending on how bold you want to make a statement. I've seen all kinds of things. Just with a simple Harbormaster and the seal of Fairfield on the front placket somewhere, or you can emblazon big letters on the back side of the jacket, Harbormaster.
Right.
It really depends. But one would logically assume that, hey, somebody's coming up on my boat. Is this friend or foe? And
right, foe.
Oh,
well, we've never done it before.
No, we haven't.
Right.
Unless it in the past, because I haven't been on the water when anyone from the mooring committee or the Harbormaster went around to any of the boats. Did he use Pequot's boat? Or was it?
That has been made. That has been offered, which I appreciate. I've got some mixed feelings about it. From the if you want to call it from the townspeople's perspective, it's like, oh, here comes the Harbormaster. Oh yeah, he's in the Junior Yacht Club's whaler. Kind of, it just doesn't quite look right.
No.
But I definitely appreciate the gesture. And that has been offered numerous times. I can't stress that enough.
Mm-hmm.
I would think
even,
the simplest thing. The simplest
I spoke with Dennis
would
McCarthy
be to make some type of placard. And
that's what I'm suggesting. You just put it over the side, off the stern somewhere, depending on where the motor is, and then even if it's the Conservation Commission boat or the whaler generously loaned to us by the yacht club, at least it identifies who's on board.
Right.
I mean, I'd like to
I get that it's not ideal, but
I'd like to propose that we take this up with the commission next week, and at a minimum, get the sign on the vessel, and also subject to whatever our budget can allow, jacket or shirts or both, as we can pull off, fitting in our budget.
Yeah, a windbreaker, Harbormaster.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
We can do this next week.
Maybe blue and yellow, so that it stands out enough.
Well, neon green.
Yeah.
No, that clashes with my complexion. I'm sorry, I can't do that.
All right.
Good.
Anything else today?
Regarding next week's meeting, Kim mentioned something, and I have to concur. I'm not crazy about speaking to everybody over the phone, and given the short tenure that the most recent additions to the Harbor Commission has, is it possible to meet in public, maintaining social distancing? Say, who knows about the weather? But my first thought was, how about Perry Green, or Yee Yacht Yard?
I think
it doesn't have to be recorded. I don't think.
Well, I think if we meet in person, and Betty is recording minutes, I don't know how that would be different than any other meeting. Right. I do know that we have filed with the town clerk a meeting schedule that requires a certain amount of time to. If it's going to be modified, because the public is entitled to attend and to know where we are at what time and what place. I suppose we could meet outside. The issue, I can't imagine they would allow us to meet indoors, because we're at least 7 commissioners plus an alternate plus Betty, plus any members of the public, which very quickly gets us over 10 or 12.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
but the town hall is closed, Kim, so the public can't go in.
Right. So.
And there may be an actual. Well, you need to know what the town policy is for. They may have a policy of not conducting, not allowing personal meetings, even if you are outside. And I just don't know. I can ask Betty to confirm that, but.
Well, it's groups of 5 or more, isn't it? I'm sorry, I just threw that out there. But given our weather,
it's a town meeting, though, Ed.
I think it would be great if we could meet in person, but I just don't see, given the restrictions, as you point out, Jeff, that they've placed on entering town hall. Jen Carpenter, when she sent around the notice that to Jack that this was how the town was conducting meetings. I think she might have said Zoom is a possibility. I'm not sure how you would get the recording done.
Yeah,
because the
IT
recording
fellows said that they don't want us using Zoom.
Okay, so.
Yeah, Zoom had some issues.
Yeah. So I think
to do it using video, but it sounded more complicated, and they were encouraging people most recently to use the system we're using today.
Yeah,
I'm not a techie.
No, this is pretty straightforward. This is pretty simple.
Yeah, this is.
Yes, and the audio connection is stable. When we've done in other towns some of the Zoom meetings, if the internet connection becomes unstable, momentarily, then it affects the audio, and it's better You can look at the computer screen, but it's better to have the connection, I believe, over the phone.
Right. I mean, I think it's important to meet. I don't, Jeff, you tell me if you think you and Jim could do it, but I don't see how you and Jim could do a presentation, which would really be my, what I would love to be able to provide to everybody. But I think that gets too complicated too fast.
Yeah.
But if we have, some specific agenda items that we've already, kind of fleshed out and are looking for approval and additions, I just think it'll be easier to take care of some business, and hopefully, there'll be other alternates as we go forward into June and July.
Yeah. I'll give Betty a call and see, but
Okay.
My thought is that there is a town policy not to have in-person
Yes.
meetings right now.
Yes,
whether it's inside
right.
or outside, and I'll check on that.
Okay.
I'll do that right now.
Okay. Anything else? All right. If not,
Thank you. Please stay well,
adjourned,
everybody.
and I will stop our recording and the meeting.
Okay. And
We're
I will be sending the instructions for our full commission meeting the next day or so.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
Do you open this up for public comments at all, or?
No, I can't do that. They're, as I said at the outset, I think you missed that part. They are required, if they wish to comment, to send their comment, their name and address to my email, which I read at the beginning of this call.
Okay.
And that would need to come promptly so that I can include it in the minutes. And I hope they do.
I got you.
All right.
Will you be able to see those comments, Jack, so that if somebody from Pequot has some suggestions, you could add it as part of your report on Tuesday?
Right. It'll be an email if I get any, and I will include them in the report.
Of course. Okay.
And it'll be filed with the town. Okay.
Great. Okay.
Very good. Thanks, everybody.
Super. Excellent.
Right.
Good meeting. All right.
Good.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. All righty. Bye.